Hello, everyone. My name is Gitika Gorthy, and today I'm very, very excited to be interviewing a very special space champion, Miss Anastasia Stepanova. Anastasia is currently a PhD student in space resources at Colorado School of Mines. She is the first female test subject in dry immersion experiments at the Institute of Biomedical Problems, a mission specialist in International Isolation Experiment Sirius 19, and a health and safety officer in the international project Mars 160. On top of all of that, Anastasia is a space journalist and has co authored the book I Wish You a Good Flight, and is the ambassador of the charity project Unity, which is helping send children's dreams to space. The moment I learned about Anastasia's incredible work, both in the science and research field, as well as her philanthropic work in spreading space education to all students, I was incredibly excited by how young she was to be doing so much. And so today I'm very excited to learn about what inspired her to pursue a career in space and what her future goals are. So, welcome, Anastasia. Thank you so much for taking your time to inspire the next generation of aerospace leaders. So I'm very excited to dive into this conversation with your experience and how it's been with everything. And to begin, I thought it would be interesting to go into your PhD research. I know with PhDs, you hyper focus on one specific topic. So I'm really curious to learn what is your current research and PhD research focused on, and kind of what are your future aims as a career once you finish your PhD?
Yeah, it's been a long road. We just recently finalized the topic, although it's my third year. Because before that, I tried to connect human space flights to space resources, which is pretty hard to do. Now I'm working on basically soon, hopefully, I will start building prototype that should work in vacuum chamber and controlled spread the lunar dust for the test on lunar dust mitigation. Basically, how different mechanisms work under these conditions. And so we are still in the process of finalizing all the topic, like narrowing it down, but yeah, working on that.
Amazing. And do you hope to continue this type of research post PhD, very specifically? Or also, do you hope to maybe integrate the human health aspect to your project in the future, maybe post PhD?
Well, definitely, hopefully, I'm not going to do the postdoc. I had enough of academia. um, yeah, I mean, before I didn't even think that I would do a PhD, but space is very demanding field, and especially if you still dream to become a cosmonaut or fly to space, it's very competitive market, and you have to be very skillful and study all the time. So yeah, after PhD, I hope to work in the industry, and always it's my passion, human space flights, and how we can help astronauts feel safe, and not only just safe, but actually feel comfortable enough, because on that depends your productivity. If you don't sleep good, if you don't like what you eat, you don't even like for example, colors of your crew chambers. This with a long period of isolation on the space station or like on moon station could affect your productivity, and in general could cause depression. So yeah.
I know it's very interesting to observe human behavior and how that isolation can affect the human mental state, which is a huge aspect in terms of space flight and the way astronauts think and are able to function in a different environment. And on that note, I know you've done various analog missions as well, which might have given you a glimpse into that feeling of isolation, which is probably why you're even more passionate about this idea and topic. Could you share a little bit more about some of your analog experiences and maybe one of your most recent slash favorite analog missions that you've been on?
Yeah, I was lucky enough to have two different types of analog missions. One was more focused on field work, on looking for signs on of life on Mars, which is organized by Mars Society. And usually they have like 2 weeks missions, but we have 3 months, 3 months long mission. And then the same crew went to Devon Island in Arctic.
Oh, wow.
Yes, and we're supposed to spend also 3 months, so it should be like a twin study mission. But due to the weather conditions, we only spent there 1 month. So we were on an habitable island, and it was very wild, and you really feel like you're on another planet, and that it's only you and 5 crew members, and
Wow.
you depend only on your skills, on your resources, and if something happens, it's pretty dangerous because there are like polar bears, and you can just freeze. So yeah, it was really good test for the crew dynamics, for yourself, if you really still want to do this, still want to live in these limitations and risks. And after that, I was part of a Series 19 mission, which organized by Russian Academy of Science, Institute of Biomedical Problems, and NASA Human Research Program. And there we had focus on us. So we were like a lab rats. Yeah. And we had more than 80 experiments on physiology, psychology, cognitive functions. And it was so different because, of course, we didn't go out. It's the station located in Moscow, and it's fully hermetic with its own atmosphere, air pressure, and there is no porthole, so we didn't see sunlight for 4 months.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I can't even imagine what that felt like.
The secret is if you're busy, if your schedule is pretty packed with important research assignments, then the time flies and you feel good. Because you feel that you're doing something worthy for science. Also, we had a crew commander cosmonaut who was on ISS in 2014, and he was, big support and always positive. And of course, you don't want to behave in front of cosmonaut like, oh, I don't want to do this, I'm tired today, blah blah blah. No. So he was really a good motivation. And yeah, it's totally different experience, but I think with the last mission, since we had more than 80 experiments from not only US and Russia, but also from Europe, and to realize that you play maybe small part, but still in human exploration, and that result that you provide might help for the future lunar missions. That's amazing.
Yeah, yeah. It sounds like everyone who dreams of becoming an astronaut should really try to seek out these analog experiences because, like you mentioned, it really gives you an idea of what it feels like to live in that environment or that type of environment for a long period of time. I think it's so easy to imagine seeing the beautiful space and to see, planets from a different perspective, but you don't think of all of the other time that you have on your hands that's so different from your daily life. And so, I'm curious, like, what has been the biggest shock to you from your analog missions? You mentioned, no sunlight. You mentioned limited resources. Like in the Arctic, you never know if you could be below freezing temperatures, if something could happen to one of the equipment, polar bears could come in. What was the most shocking aspect of an analog mission you didn't realize before that you found out from your experience?
Um, Unfortunately, it's a human factor. It's us humans, the behavior inside of the crew, how with the time, also some crew members change, and if like the most analog missions now they're short, right? So it's like 1 week or 2 weeks, and everyone feels great because it's like vacation. It's not long enough. The whole thing, like the problems or well, I mean, like psychological problems or tension or tiredness starts after a month. So I think it's really, if you really want to test yourself, it's better to go for longer missions, at least like 3 months or 2 months. And yeah, how people are changing, how this isolation affect them, how everyone is coping, and that was for me really curious. It's just mind blowing. And I think after that, after the serious mission, I continued working at Institute of Biomedical Problems, and for 8 months isolation series, I was not in the crew. I was already on organizational side, and I was managing and choosing actually the crew and training them, choosing food, clothes, and changing a little bit, furniture inside, and bringing paintings or pictures, because I knew what you would need. Because 8 months, it's a long duration. It's will be way harder than what I had. And when I was choosing crew members, I always looked at their motivation, because I realized that people who go for these missions for money or PR and fame, they the ones who don't really cope with that well. And because the motivation is not super high, but if you have motivation from your heart, to help science, for space, etc., you're very responsible, so you can hold yourself together, and it will help you keep doing what you're doing, even when you're also not in the best mood, or when your crew members irritate you or something. So yeah, I think it's will be the most challenging to choose. For example, if we're talking about even the moon, flight to the Mars, to choose astronauts, and I'm not sure that military, characters are the best ones. So it will be a mix, but still, it will be challenging.
That's a really interesting perspective. And actually, it's the first time someone has vocalized it. I feel like I've heard individuals say human behavior changes in analog missions, but the perspective you bring of what type of astronaut should we be selecting? What type of analog astronaut should we be selecting? It's a very important question because you've been through it for not a year or 8 months or 4 or 5 years, but a prolonged period of time that's much greater than 2 weeks of a quick analog mission. You really understand what it takes to go through months and being in an isolated space with few people every single day. And so you make a really good point trying to figure out which type of individuals would be best suited on not just going to the moon or going to the International Space Station, but going to a mission, a place that's, months away, it takes months to get there. So it's a really good point, and it's an important criteria that we have to keep evolving and adapting to. And more scientific research, like you mentioned, psychological studies and understanding human character, behavior, and what type of personalities might be best for this first type of mission to Mars is a very important consideration. So thank you for pointing that out. And another interesting aspect of your work that I thought was very cool and something I connected with was your outreach. So I was very surprised to hear about your work in space journalism on top of the research and writing a book. I thought that was amazing. So could you share a little bit more about what your book is on and what was the inspiration for writing this and getting involved in space journalism, which I feel like is a whole other big world in itself?
Yeah, actually, I started my space career with space journalism.
Oh,
It was my first degree back in 2010. And so I applied for journalism because back then, it was in 2005, I didn't believe that, I'm good enough to apply for anything like aerospace related, especially in the beginning of 2000. So but then I think, sometimes it's really a destiny, because how it's possible that on, faculty of journalism, you would see that there is a space journalism school that is led by a cosmonaut. And I was like, what? So I, of course, applied. And so I spent 4 years there. And together with two other students, we wrote a book, because at that moment in Russia, we didn't have like not Soviet style books, but like modern books about space. It wasn't popular, it wasn't trendy. And so we decided to write a book, with a simple language explaining the industry and also what it takes to become a cosmonaut and what you should be prepared for. So from the history to modern days. And after that, it took me a few years again to believe in myself, and I just realized that I have to work in space, only in space, and I applied to Mars One, which is now bankrupt, and it was quite controversial project. But anyway, this project gave me I think the main thing, since I started passing every round. I started to believe in myself and also getting involved into the space field and understanding which blank spots I have. And of course, I realized that just journalism degree is not enough. You need to get second degree in engineering or in science. So I chose engineering, I again participated, like applied for different projects like Mars Society one, and et cetera, et cetera. And I was just super proactive and, volunteered for different things just to learn as much as possible. I also applied and became a rescuer. And that's why in our Mars Society mission, I was health and safety officer because of my skills and certification as a rescuer. So yeah, it was pretty busy years, but I think it was the best time. Yes, you don't have personal life, but I think there should be moments in life when you don't care about that, where you just work for your future. And as long as you enjoy what you're doing, getting second degree in engineering or doing anything else, but as long as you enjoy it and you understand that that is for your future, for your dream, that's amazing. And your personal life will come later on. So while you're young, do this.
That's beautifully said. I think that, everything you said, there's just so much to unpack there, starting from what you last said. I think as a student, sometimes you tend to think, or even as an adult, you tend to think, oh, I have to follow this like step-by-step path. I need to have a personal life. I need to do everything at once. And it's so hard to manage everything. I mean, we're all human. Like, we all need to prioritize what's important. And like you said, I think there are times in your life where you need that balance, but other times you have this passion that you really want to follow. And sometimes giving it your all is the most important. I love that piece of advice. I mean, I know I will definitely keep saying that to myself every time I feel a little bit like, oh, I don't know if I should do this or not. I think finding what makes you work that hard is so important. I'm reading a book right now. It's You Can't Hurt Me. It's a best-selling novel here or autobiography here in the U.S. And I was reading it, and the same message was given in that story. He was, just I think it's such an important message anyhow. And I think, what you mentioned about your career path from space journalism to currently doing research is one that I really want to know about. But before I get there and learn about that specific story, because it seems like you had to do a lot of networking, a lot of redirecting to find your way to where you currently are, I did have a question about Russia's space economy right now. Just like from your perspective, you mentioned maybe in the early 2000s when you were doing journalism, there weren't a lot of space, trendy space books, and there weren't a lot of, space wasn't as, I mean, I think Russia is known to have a great space program. So how do you think that the space program, space perspective in Russia has changed in the past 20, 30 years from what you've witnessed?
Definitely now there is way more outreach and projects about space. I moved out from Russia a few years ago, and before that, space was, I mean, it's still popular here, and they have amazing outreach projects, a lot of lectures. I was invited and traveled around Russia with space lectures, a lot of cover, from the media on our experiments. So the public definitely became more aware and very educated. I compared when I was giving talks in 2013 and, for example, 19. It's a big difference. And now everyone, knows about the private space sector, about general information and astronomy, etc. So yeah, and of course, I don't know if you heard, we had even shot the movie on ISS called Wiz of, I don't know how they translated it into English, I guess Challenge or something.
I've
Yeah,
heard of this. I heard of this because my roommate is from Moscow. And so she was telling me about it. And I was like, that's so cool. I can't believe I haven't heard of this before. Yeah.
yeah. So on one side they're very open, but on another side, it's still, we still don't have much of private space sector. It's mostly the companies, private companies are, you know, satellites, but we don't have like big companies like SpaceX, and it's still like very government regulated, so that's why it's quite challenging. And yeah, I mean, I wish it will be more open in terms of also of cosmonaut selection, and you know, involve more women there. So far we have now only one female. Yes, and it's been like that since 2014. So, and that's why I also had to move abroad to, you know, try and continue to fulfill my dream, because I realized that unfortunately there at the moment, you know, I don't have any options. So yeah, I hope it will change and I can go back and also play important part in, you know, cosmonautics in my country.
That's amazing. Yeah, I mean, it's grown so much in the past 10, 20 years, but as you mentioned, there's still such a long way to go for many countries. But even with your perspective with what's happening in Russia, I think hopefully in the next 10, 15 years, hopefully it won't take that long, but hopefully within the next 10 years, we see a big difference. And you know, when you heard when you know when you're talking about the last question and you talked about your story, I thought it was very inspiring because a lot of times, including myself right now, you tend to pick a degree and you're like, I have to stick with this for the rest of my life. I'm bound to it. There's no way I can do anything else. And it's like a really stressful feeling. I think many people, many adults, you know, midlife, they're like, oh, I don't want to do this anymore, but are nervous or scared to change their degrees or pursue a different degree. And so seeing you take that challenge and really follow your calling, I think is so inspiring. And so I'm curious, when did your passion for space really start? You know, was it when you were young? And how was it like changing from space journalism to an engineering degree and actually trying to find a place in the growing space ecosystem as someone who's not from the US who now moved here? I think there are multiple questions in that, but I'm curious to hear about your space story.
Yeah, so as a kid, I was passionate about space because my parents were reading me, you know, science fiction books. So, and I was like, oh, great. When I grow up, for sure we'll fly to moon and we'll have this advanced society and blah, blah, blah. It didn't happen. So, and then, yeah, it was when you're young, it's hard to find your path straight away. You know, some people are very lucky who knows, like at age, I don't know, 15, I want to be an actor or
Yeah.
doctor, and that's it.
Yeah.
But for me, it was also, you know, even like space journalism. But then I was like, oh, maybe I'm not smart enough to do actually engineering. And I think when you start actually trying and, you know, applying, and if people next to you support you, it's also very important. So I decided to make this big move, and yeah, and do downshifting. Like I had to work only part-time, so I would earn less, but then also I had to pay for my education. It was in Moscow. It's cheaper than US, so thanks God, but still. And yeah, but it was amazing time. It was really challenging from humanitarian you know, degree to go into engineering, because in journalism we don't have any math classes, etc. And my brains literally, well, they hurt physically. So you know, like muscles that never been touched and now they have to work. So I had to take extra classes. I had to pay for tutors, and just, you know, as my dad says, you know, put a brick on your bum, which, you know, and just sit and study. So Yeah, but with every success, like, with every assignment that I got A or B on math, I was like, wow, I'm so happy. So it's challenging, but it's definitely worth it. And then I was, successful in my career in Moscow, working at Institute of Biomedical Problems, first as a test subject, then as engineer, and after that, I had to move here. And space resources is different field, so it's again you have to study something new. And I don't know. I wasn't like scared, but of course, I just, since I had the previous experience, and I thought that the huge transition was from journalism to engineering. So I was like, okay, if I manage that, I think I
You
can
can do
manage
anything.
this. Yeah. But again, it's a lot of study, and yeah, I basically most of the time you're in isolation, voluntary, because you stay in your room and just study. So I know there are moments where you have to, unfortunately, maybe sacrifice super comfortable life and everything. And again, when I moved to US, for me it was downshifting. It was like changing my life. And kind of starting from scratch. And it's hard when, especially you do it at 36, and when you're already successful in your country, you go to another country and you're no one there. And so you have to prove all the time something. And, especially and political tension and all the situations in the last 2 years. So it was fun ride, a roller coaster, but now everything is, getting better, and I feel more comfortable, and hopefully, I can finish my PhD in the next 2 years.
It's amazing. I think anyone who's listening to your story right now will gain confidence to go down a similar path if they've thought about it. I think it's so hard when you feel like you're the only one who's doing this, but your story of how you were and you still are trying to get through this tough, little channel, tough little period of your time in life, and you're trying to push through. I think it's very, very inspiring that you are going through it with a positive mindset. I think it's so nice to see someone doing that. It really gives confidence to other adults, other students, other young professionals who want to, change what they're doing or pursue a challenging opportunity in a different country. It might seem intimidating to give up, to leave behind your family or leave behind whatever culture you have and to come to a completely different place to pursue your career. But the way you've been doing it, and you're acknowledging it's hard, but like you mentioned, building that support system who you can rely on, building that network of community is so important. But most importantly, keeping the vision of where you'll be in 6 years from now. And now that we were able to learn a little bit about some of the work you do and your journey, which is incredibly inspiring. I notice on social media you have an incredible community of supporters, a great network. You're very active on X, on LinkedIn. You participate in all these different challenges and make time to take opportunities to apply to different programs, apply to different missions, and you keep yourself up to date. I think this is very commendable and very hard for everyone to keep track of. So, what advice would you give for other students or other adults who want to find these opportunities and want to build this network? How do you suggest that they approach this path as they figure out what their career avenue would look like? I think it might be beneficial to hear some advice on how you do it all.
Wow, okay. I thought I'm not super active on social media because I'm like, often I'm like, I should maybe do more, but I don't have time and blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, I think when I prefer to post something that has value, like information that has value, not just blah, blah, I'm here. And often I, of course, think, who would read this, or if people are interested or not. But then I get responses like, "Hey, Anastasia, why you don't post some, more?" Like, so this is good also to hear the feedback. But I think it's important to have like proper base to actually have knowledge in the field, something interesting to say, and not just um, nowadays, like on internet, you can see a lot of information that doesn't mean much or not worth it. So I think it's important to have this, and plus to this, your genuine interest from you and being pretty open and not fake. It's, I know it's hard. I know, especially what I see now, it's a lot of, masks people are having and writing about their life on social media, which is half true or something like that. So I think for me, I prefer to write not about like my personal life, but about kind of space personal or just space, but still that it will have a personal touch. So yeah, and a sense of humor. So a little bit of humor there. So I don't know. It just, I'm not the best like, social media person to give recommendations. I think I'm getting old and I couldn't follow all the trends. But yeah, when I have some news, I just write about it and that's it. And I don't plan anything. I don't plan like posts and when it should be published. I don't do all that. So yeah, I think it's just intuitive. But
Yeah.
to building a network, it's also, for me, it's also important to be a good and decent human being, to always be responsible for your words, to not ghost people. I hate it, like even you write someone, okay, if you don't want to do this or you can't help, just write it. But people think that, oh, it will be impolite if I write it, but it will be even worse if you just ghost someone. So I always try to respond to anyone who writes me and to help if I can, because I know how hard it is. And it's just, it's like, karma. So if you behave like, it's just like that. So I think less egocentrism, less selfishness, and just yeah, be more open and talk with people genuine. And especially in US, many people appreciate that because um, it's not so common, I guess, here to be so honest. Yeah, so
I love that. I actually really agree with probably everything you just said right now. I had a very similar experience. I think first, like you said, being purposeful on social media is so important. First off, making posts at first, I was very nervous, like you. I was like, who would want to read my post? Like, I have nothing important to say. Like, people will judge me or people will say this. And I was so busy and caught up worrying about what other people think of me as opposed to just posting things that I think have value, that share information, that maybe update people on, hey, like I'm doing this mission or I'm part of this experience. Like maybe if you would like to support or collaborate, like let's connect. I was nervous at first to make those types of posts. I wouldn't make them too frequently, but I think I'm pretty active and I try to make it purposeful, and I was nervous in the beginning and I realized that people actually care about what you have to say if it has meaning, if it has a purpose, if you want to share something that can bring information, bring knowledge, bring connections. Everybody appreciates that and people do care about your social media and what you do with it. I think it's a very powerful networking tool that really changed my life personally. Everyone that I've interviewed on YouTube so far has been a LinkedIn or Twitter, sorry, X contact, and it's been amazing how I've been able to develop this community of supporters, people who I've never met in person, sharing their stories, which wouldn't have been possible if I didn't send that, initial request on LinkedIn, or I didn't make that social media post so people could learn about who I am and our organization, what we're doing. I think, like you said, social media has such a huge power if you're purposeful with it. but more so if you take that risk to reaching out to people and making those relations, being honest, and not ghosting anyone. I appreciate this too. I love it when people get back to me, even if it's with a no. So I 100% echo everything you just said. And you know, I just want to thank you so much, Anastasia, for sharing your story, for being so vulnerable. I think it's sometimes really difficult to share all the obstacles you've had or everything about your story, but you know, you did that today, and I think so many students and adults can relate with what you just said. I know I got so much away from this, and I know I'll be putting my head down and focusing on my passion, even if it means saying no to other things. So, really, thank you so much for doing this interview, and I hope to be able to meet you in person soon once you complete your PhD. Very, very excited for you.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure. And, whoever is listening, if you have any questions, you can write me on, I don't know, Instagram, LinkedIn, etc.
I will link
Yeah,
it all down below.
thank you.